Imagine Rome in 67 AD. You're in the Forum and see Emperor Nero walking proudly beside a young woman dressed in shining silk and jewelry. But the crowd isn't amazed, they're whispering. Everyone knows the truth. That woman was once a boy named Sporus. What Nero forced on him became one of the most disturbing stories of abuse in Roman history. Before I share this dark chapter, if you're into hidden parts of history, hit like and subscribe for more. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I think it's incredible that people around the world can connect through these old stories. This isn't just another tale about Roman luxury. It's about how power can twist love into obsession, grief into madness, and a person into nothing more than an object for one man's desires. You might not know the name Sporus, but once you hear his story, it won't leave your mind. To understand it, we need to look at Nero himself. He didn't start as a tyrant. When he became emperor at only 16, many thought a bright new era had begun. At first he lowered taxes, funded public shows, and even acted on stage for the crowd's amusement. But absolute power eats away at people. By 65 AD, Nero had changed completely. Maybe fear of rivals broke him. Maybe loneliness at the top made him unstable. Or maybe it was what happened with the one person he claimed to love most. Her name was Poppaea Sabina. She was stunning, clever, and as ambitious as Nero. Not just decoration in the palace, she had the instincts of a sharp politician. When Nero noticed her, he was married to Octavia, the last emperor's daughter. That marriage was cold and political. Poppaea was the opposite. Octavia was quiet and stayed in the background, Poppaea was lively and loved the spotlight. Their relationship began like gossip but quickly turned into something dangerous. Nero wasn't just in love, he was consumed. Writers of the time said he lost control if men looked at her too long. He placed guards around her, more to spy than protect. He drowned her in gifts, gems, silks, perfumes from across the empire. Still, he wanted more. He divorced Octavia, shocking Rome, and staged a lavish wedding with Poppaea. But even marriage didn't satisfy him. He cut her off from family and friends, surrounding her only with his loyal followers. He filled his private rooms with portraits and statues of her so he could look at her even when she wasn't there. Writers from the time say Nero could spend hours just watching Poppaea go about her day. This wasn't love, it was possession. To him she wasn't a person with her own life, but something beautiful he owned. Poppaea seemed to understand the risk. She knew Nero's obsession gave her power, but she also knew that power came with danger. She used her position to help her family and build allies, people who might protect her if Nero's attention faded. Her greatest weakness was that she didn't fear him. While others in the palace carefully adjusted to the emperor's moods, she kept her independence. She argued with him about politics, mocked his plays when she thought they were poor, and criticized his choices. One day in 65 AD, a fight between them turned deadly. Different historians tell different details, some say it was about him staying too long at the races, others about his theater shows, but all agree on the end. Nero lost control. The historian Tacitus wrote that Poppaea had told Nero he cared more about fame than his role as husband and father. She was pregnant at the time with their second child, and her patience with his behavior had worn thin. What happened next remains debated, but most agree Nero lashed out violently. Some say he struck her once in the stomach. Others claim he beat her until she collapsed. Either way, her injuries were fatal. Imagine the shock when Nero realized what he had done. The most powerful man in the empire, worshipped as a god, had just destroyed the one thing he truly loved. Poppaea lay dying because of his own violence. Ancient accounts describe what followed as pathetic and desperate. He fell on her body, crying, begging her to forgive him, ordering her to stay alive. Doctors were rushed in and offered money or threatened with torture if they failed. But nothing could be done. Poppaea died, and with her the unborn child who might have been Nero's heir. Something broke in Nero after that. His grief wasn't just sadness, it was madness. He refused the Roman custom of burning her body and instead had it embalmed and buried in a tomb grander than those of past emperors. He declared her a goddess, started a cult in her name, and spoke to her corpse as if she still lived. Courtiers were forced to play along, speaking of her in the present tense and leaving her seat open at feasts. Anyone who suggested moving on was punished or sent away. During this time, Sporus first came to Nero's attention, without realizing he was stepping into a nightmare. Sporus was only about 14 or 15, born a slave in the palace and later freed. He had been educated for administrative work, which was considered a privilege. Freedmen serving in the palace often had better lives than poor citizens outside, but they also depended completely on imperial favor. They could rise high or be destroyed instantly. What drew Nero to Sporus wasn't his skill but his face. Ancient writers say he looked strikingly like Poppaea, especially around the eyes and cheekbones. Romans believed that resemblance showed a deeper link, even spiritual. The first time Nero saw Sporus after Poppaea's death, he seemed to believe fate had given him another chance. The likeness was so close that Nero may have thought Poppaea had returned in another form. The problem, of course, was that Sporus was male. But for a man who believed himself divine and who had spoken for months to a corpse, that was no obstacle. What came next was one of the cruelest acts in history. Nero didn't just want Sporus to dress like a woman. He wanted the change to be permanent. He ordered doctors to operate on the boy to make him appear female. This was more than mutilation, it was the destruction of a person's identity. The surgery was dangerous and often deadly. If Sporus survived, his life would never be the same. He would never father children, never have normal relationships, and never be seen as a man again. The procedure took place inside the palace. Ancient surgery was brutal, with simple tools and little pain relief. He would have been restrained while the doctors worked, his cries ignored. Recovery took weeks or months. When he finally healed, Nero shocked Rome once again. He declared he would marry Sporus in a full imperial wedding. The wedding plans took months and drained massive resources. Sporus was renamed Sabina, after the dead empress, and moved into special rooms where he was trained for his new role. Palace tailors made gowns to fit his altered body and hide what remained of his masculinity. Jewelers designed ornaments just for him, some using gems that had once belonged to Poppaea. These weren't just decorations. They were reminders of the woman Sporus was being forced to replace. He was taught how to use makeup, how to darken his eyes with kohl, add color to his cheeks, and soften his face with powders. Each lesson was a step in erasing who he had been. Hairdressers styled his hair in complicated patterns, using pins, ornaments, and heated tools. The process took hours and needed several attendants. Even more damaging were the lessons in how to act. Tutors taught him to sit, stand, and move like a Roman noblewoman. He practiced placing his hands, crossing his feet, arranging his dress, and moving with practiced grace. Voice trainers worked to raise his tone and change how he spoke. It was one of the hardest parts, because speech patterns are hard to change. Imagine the torment of watching yourself disappear day by day, forced to wear the image of someone else. Each piece of jewelry was like a chain, each practice of mannerisms a reminder that his true self was being erased. The wedding was set for spring 67 AD to match religious festivals. Nero spent lavishly to make it a full imperial wedding. The palace hall was filled with flowers and thousands of lamps. Musicians played, servants offered food and wine, and from the outside it might have looked like a normal Roman marriage. But those who knew the truth saw something disturbing. The emperor was marrying a teenage boy, surgically altered and dressed as his dead wife. The full Roman rituals were performed: vows, bread sharing, legal documents. The guests smiled and offered gifts, but the room must have been filled with unease and horror. Afterward, Nero treated Sporus like a true empress. He was given his own servants, living space in the palace, and funds from the treasury. He had horses, a carriage, and staff. Yet all this wealth came at the cost of his identity. His life became a constant performance. He sat beside Nero at dinners, joined him in ceremonies, and played the role of devoted wife. Nero truly acted as if Poppaea had returned. He called Sporus by her name, spoke of memories they had never shared, and expected him to go along. For Sporus, every day was a dangerous performance where one mistake could mean death. He had to remember not only how to act like a woman, but also how to answer as if he were Poppaea herself. Ancient writers say he became very skilled at reading Nero's moods, though he grew more withdrawn with time. The mental toll was crushing. Every morning he woke in rooms decorated for a woman he never knew. Every mirror showed a stranger's face. Every word he spoke had to support the lie. For over 2 years, he lived this way. When Nero traveled to Greece, Sporus went with him, presented as the empress to foreign leaders. Imagine the confusion of Greek elites, forced to honor a boy in women's clothing as if he were truly Rome's empress. But by 68 AD, Nero's abuses pushed Rome too far. Revolt spread, the Praetorian Guard turned on him, and the Senate branded him an enemy. Nero fled the city with a few followers, including Sporus, who remained by his side even in those final days. They hid in a villa outside Rome while Nero swung between wild escape plans and preparing for suicide. When his enemies closed in, Nero finally killed himself. Sporus, left behind, became both a prize and a burden. He passed from one powerful man to another, first Sabinus, then Otho, then Vitellius. Each kept him dressed as Poppaea and called him by her name. Under Vitellius, his fate grew darker. The emperor planned to display him in the arena in a humiliating performance. Rather than face public abuse, Sporus chose his own end. He likely took poison in 69 AD, only about 20 years old. For the first time in years, he made a choice that was truly his. His story is tragic not only for the suffering he endured, but because his real identity was erased. From the moment Nero saw a resemblance to Poppaea, Sporus stopped being himself and became a tool for another man's fantasy. His suicide showed that, buried under layers of forced roles, some part of his true self still survived. We know almost nothing about the boy before Nero. His dreams, his hopes, his future, all were stolen. He was turned into a false empress, lived years of torment, and finally chose death over more humiliation. Sporus deserves to be remembered not as a symbol of decadence, but as a reminder of the cruelty of unchecked power and the resilience of the human spirit. In the end, his final act reclaimed the freedom that had been denied to him in life. His story cuts through the grand history of emperors to show the human cost hidden beneath it.